Hi, welcome back to the Canton Clay Works. I'm Tim Scull, the owner. Our next demo is an additional intermediate demo. These pieces that I'm showing you, or this piece in particular, are my signature work of over 20 years. What I'm doing here is I am incising the exterior wall with a texture created by needle tools, and then I am compressing dehydrated clay. And then I expand the wall, and the dehydrated clay breaks apart the exterior wall into this bark of a tree texture. The top of the piece I smooth with a flexi rib, and I put a glossy glaze on the top. So there's really a contrast in surface tension between the side wall and the top. This particular piece has been raku fired and volatilized with ferrous chloride, creating the metallic iron luster. This technique can be done at many different firing ranges with many different varieties of dry clay. I do wood fire these pieces, and I compress Newman's red clay, I compress red art, I compress Helmar clay, which is a flashing clay that interacts with the vapor in a wood kiln. So let me show you how I do that technique, and I'll pass this off to my assistant Cheryl. Thank you, Cheryl. So I'm not going to go through all the hand positions of throwing, but I'm just going to pull this up into a cylindrical form. This is brown stoneware. The pieces that I raku fire, I use white stoneware, but I regularly do this technique for my high fire gas kiln and wood and soda kiln. It is wonderful using a variety of different clays. As I said, in the high fire range, I generally use red art, Newman's red, which is another iron bearing earthenware clay, and I use Helmar, which is a kaolin containing trace elements of iron. They do very, very nice in high fire kilns, particularly the stronger, darker tones of iron, which you'll find in red art and Newman's red, because in high fire they'll turn chocolate brown. It's also a really wonderful technique for you all to try different colors of clay on top of white clay as well. Or what I'm going to do in this demo, I'm going to use ball clay in this instance on top of brown clay, so it gives you a two-toned effect, which is very dramatic, very appealing. I always leave a deposit of clay at the rim. I want to close my rim in. And in order to close my rim in, I have to be sure to leave clay up at the rim so there's enough clay there for me to manipulate inward. Okay, this is good. So do you see this large deposit from that line up of clay, and that's the clay that I'm going to work inward. So I aim it inward right now, just like that. Then I'm going to take a needle tool, or two. In this case I have one needle tool. I always recommend cleaning up your hands and get all the slop and slurry and wet, loose clay off your hands. Alright, I take my needle tool. Very fast wheel speed. At 3 o'clock, I'm going to incise a very shallow incision into the exterior wall. I'm going fast wheel speed, but I'm going very slow motion with the needle tool as I raise it vertically. So to your eye, it's going to look like hundreds of parallel lines. But in fact, it's a very gradually ascending spiral. Now, what I'm after when I do this is a very organic look, like the bark of a tree. There are individuals who do this and they can manipulate the texture to look a little more man-made. So now I take my needle tool and I go in a descending line, a little faster rate. So now we have intersecting, ascending and descending spirals. It's hard to tell when it's moving like this. I'll stop and show you so you can see it's stationary. There we go. Now if I compressed my dehydrated clay into the exterior wall and expanded it at this stage, this would expand and look like the treads of the tires of your car or your truck. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a very organic bark of a tree look. So I'm taking my needle tool now and I'm very lightly slashing randomly all along the exterior wall. It's important not to go too deep into the wall or you'll weaken the side wall. These are just slight surface incisions, not to deteriorate the structure of the clay, the structural integrity. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to take ball clay. Ball clay is a secondary stoneware. It's very, very common. It's very inexpensive. And I'm compressing the ball clay into the texture gently. I am trying to always have ball clay between my hand and the exterior wall of the vessel so that my hand isn't smearing or altering the texture, but instead the ball clay is being absorbed into the moist exterior wall that has been textured. It's very important at this stage is to take the ball clay off your wheel head so that you're not spinning this at a fast rate and airborning the ball clay into your studio, because you don't want to be breathing all of that. I also wet it. Ball clay is a very, very common component of stonewares, so this can go right into your recycling bucket without affecting your clay. It's going to clean up this upper area that is not textured, where you saw a big chunk of ball clay stuck there. There we go. Now this is where we're at in terms of the textured wall compressed with the ball clay. You can hardly see the texture, but that won't be for long. So watch what I'm going to do now. I'm going to rib outward and take a look at the exterior wall. I'm going to rib it into a round pillow or globe shape, and I will stop the wheel once I've ribbed it a couple times so that you can see how dramatic the expanding exterior wall and its texture is. And this is just one or two ribbings up and down. And so if you notice, it's becoming two-tone. The furthest exterior of the wall is where the ball clay is, and the gouges in texture, which looks like shadows, are the brown stoneware. So I'm even going to make this more dramatic and rib it out significantly further. It's important to lift your rib up through the upper shoulder to prevent this piece from collapsing. And check out that texture. Really expanded, very dramatic. So I'm going to stop this demo at this moment, because what I'll need to do is take a couple of moments with a heat gun in this area. Do you see how this is just slightly moist? I'm going to, actually I'll keep going, watch. I think it structurally has a little more integrity. But as I weaken this upper area, I will stop and I will use a heat gun on it, but I'll go as far as I can for you. I don't think you want to watch me how I use a heat gun on the top. But then I bring this up and in. Notice the angle at which I'm bringing it up and in. You do not want to pull horizontally. I am pulling this clay in. I regularly put one of these fingers, middle finger, index finger, moist on the inside wall, supporting it so it doesn't collapse. Connect these hands together via the thumb. See, that's the left thumb. compressing the clay against the lubricated interior finger that is stationary. The interior finger is supporting this wall from this point to the rim. And notice the angle. That angle is important. If you try to go horizontal too soon, it will collapse on you. And as you learn to do this, you'll lose a lot of pots until you refine the technique. But the tricks from Tim the Potter is to make sure that you do not go horizontally prematurely, or the piece will collapse on you. Now I can start to bring it down just a little bit. This is probably my last pull, and then if I wanted to close it anymore, I would use a heat gun. Just to firm it up so it doesn't collapse on me. Then I can bring a rim up, because if I want this to be a vase, I want a big enough opening to hold flowers. I will use my needle tool on the rim, clean the rim up with a sponge, just finish off the surface area, bring it down just a wee bit. And this is where you learn how far you can push it. There we go. Very dramatic texture. And I would most likely wood fire this piece, maybe even in the salt chamber. It might be a really wonderful piece. I will glaze the upper section and leave this raw and natural. Thank you again for joining us.